Good afternoon. This is Greg Krasovsky, an American attorney, immigration attorney, and today is July 4th. So I want to wish everyone a happy Independence Day. Big thing. Today I wanted to talk to you about immigration services. Considering that we are a country of immigrants, and given all the controversy that we have today regarding the detainees at the Mexican border, figured it makes sense to talk about immigration law services. But more specifically, I want to talk today about family-based immigration services, which is a good part of my immigration law practice. If you're a U.S. citizen, or you are a permanent resident, or if you are the relative, currently or potentially in the future, of an American citizen or a permanent resident, you have two options. You can try to get things done yourself with U.S. Citizen Immigration Services, as well as the State Department when it comes to applying for visas and being interviewed for visas and all that. Or you can spend a little bit of money and use the services of an experienced and competent immigration law attorney. I don't want to toot my own horn, but my advice is seek some advice from an experienced and competent immigration lawyer. If it's me or someone else, make sure you do it. I'll tell you why. Even an initial consultation may help answer questions in terms of how you should fill out forms, what information you're obligated to provide, if there are any discrepancies, if you can't find certain documents. These are important issues, both regarding the sponsor, in other words, the U.S. citizen or the permanent resident, as well as the relative who's going to come in from overseas or from another country. So that's extremely important, because often people will approach my law office and ask for my legal support and help after they've already submitted applications, having filled them out on their own, made fairly obvious, predictable mistakes, or submitted data that wasn't accurate, and then there are horrible consequences. You can be denied. You can even be accused of submitting false information that can lead to a ban on entry, even a permanent ban on entry. So it's not worth risking. There are even simple cases where people haven't been able to get certain things done on their own. For instance, you're a U.S. citizen and your child is born abroad. Not a complicated thing, right? Either to two U.S. citizens or to one U.S. citizen. You think, all right, I'm going to go to the U.S. Embassy and the consular section or American Citizen Services and obtain a consular report of birth abroad. So we have a birth certificate for all practical purposes that can be used in the U.S. Obviously, a foreign birth certificate can also be used in the U.S. if it has an apostille, and since the U.S. is a signatory of the Hague Convention, it would be valid, along with, I guess, a notarized translation. But consular report of birth abroad is important as well, especially if you want to obtain a passport, a U.S. passport for your child, which he would need or she would need to travel to the U.S. with you if you're returning to the U.S. anytime soon. This is also relevant for expats who are not planning to return to the U.S. You know, they didn't just go abroad to have the child. They may be living abroad permanently. And you would think that this is a simple procedure. People get put to the third degree. Why? Because in order for the child to receive a consular report of birth abroad, the CRBA, you have to show that, first of all, obviously you have to show proof of U.S. citizenship, which would be a passport, naturalization certificate, or a certificate of citizenship if you acquire citizenship in other ways. But you also have to show that you lived in the U.S. for 5 years. That's, I think, 1,825 days. And often people have problems compiling and submitting all the required proof, which can be extensive, right? Rental agreements, titles to housing, utility bills, driver's licenses, voter registration cards, tax returns, all sorts, subscriptions to magazines, cellular phone plans and bills. Well, that's the biggest part of utility bills. You can call it that. So, or if you went to school, same thing. You're going to have to provide your educational records. So don't you think you're going to go in there and submit what you have and be able to prove to the consular officers that you lived in the U.S. for 5 years? This is also relevant, for instance, if you're applying for citizenship for your child under Section 320, which allows you to obtain citizenship for your child, even if it's not your biological child. Oh, and getting back to the biological child requirement, that's another challenge. What if your child was conceived out of wedlock? What if your child was born out of wedlock? Now you also have to show proof that this is your biological child. And even up to DNA test results at specific certified facilities that are approved by the U.S. State Department. So, to save yourself a lot of grief and needless and repeat trips to the U.S. counselor, right, to the counselor section, talk to a lawyer. We'll show you what you need to gather. We'll review everything that you have and let you know what you need, what else you need. Also, potentially, a letter from a lawyer or a letter from relatives or other people who can vouch for you, things like that. Section 320 presents additional challenges, but it's also a little bit easier. Under Section 320, let's say you married a foreign citizen and that person already had children, has minor children, that you would like them as your children, so now you're in a legal marriage, to become U.S. citizens. How do you proceed to doing that? Talk to us, talk to me, I'll explain everything to you. And I'll make sure that we can submit everything the right way for you, so you don't get denied and lose a lot of time, especially if they're time-sensitive issues, vacation travel for medical purposes, weddings, things like that. Family-based immigration. You want to have someone come over as an immigrant and be able to qualify for a green card. If you're a U.S. citizen and you're petitioning certain immediate relatives, like your spouse, minor children, or children who haven't been married yet, straightforward. What if you're petitioning parents? What if you're not a U.S. citizen? What if you're only a green card holder? There are wait times. You also have to meet support requirements. You have to demonstrate that you'll be able to support the immigrant, that he doesn't become a ward of the state and start collecting public assistance. What if you're a U.S. citizen who's living abroad, who's an expat, and you'd like to sponsor your wife or your children or other relatives that qualify for a green card, for an immigrant visa to the U.S.? Well, you're also going to have to demonstrate that you're returning to the U.S. yourself, right? They're not going to go there without you. And there are lots of requirements. Where are you going to work in the U.S.? Where are you going to live? What other ties do you have to the U.S.? Travel plans, tickets, and what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Right? How are you going to have proof of employment or proof of travel if you're not going to go by yourself, right, without your spouse or your children? So I'll explain everything to you. We'll make sure we'll put together everything correctly. So we'll minimize the chances of denial. And if you've been unfairly and improperly denied, because it depends on the counselor official you encounter. Sometimes they're just like bureaucrats. They can give you a hard time and deny you, even though they shouldn't be denying you. That's another reason why you'll need the help of a lawyer. So, family-based immigration, most immigrants go through it who have relatives abroad or who have spouses who are foreign citizens or children or things like that. What's also relevant is, let's say you come to the U.S. on a work visa and you want to bring over a family, you want to bring over relatives. Sure, you can get derivative visas for spouses, for children, but also talk to a lawyer and he'll explain to you all the issues you can encounter in the event, let's say, you have to change employers, or your employer decides to terminate you. What's going to happen? what are the options if you've come to the U.S. and your children already have been acclimatized to living, you're used to living in the U.S., they're in schools, things like that. So my goal is, when it comes to immigration law, to protect your rights that you're entitled to under all of these not so straightforward immigration regulations, including the infamous Immigration Naturalization Act. And there are other issues you run into. Remember, you're also at the mercy not just of USCIS, but consular officials, which work for the State Department. Even if you do obtain an immigrant visa for someone, or a tourist visitor visa, and that's another issue that comes up. Often people would like their relatives to obtain just tourist visas, not immigrant visas. And then that requires legal help as well, because your relative could be denied a tourist visa because the consular official will say, well, since you have relatives in the U.S., I think you have migrant intent, right? I think you're a potential immigrant, and try to prove to me otherwise. So we go through everything. We prepare all the appropriate documentation that people need to present at the interview or before the interview to consular officials. If necessary, provide accompanying letters that explain the situation at hand. Make sure that your relative can obtain either a tourist or an immigrant visa, whatever is appropriate. So that's something to think about. Let's see if we missed anything else on that front when it comes to you've got relatives abroad. Well, I guess another category of clients is people who approach me. They've met someone abroad. They're interested in marrying someone who's not a U.S. citizen. So then you have an issue in terms of immigration regulations and other legal considerations. Where should they marry? Should they marry in the country, in the foreign country, either in the country of their spouse, foreign spouse, future spouse, right, fiance, or should they marry in another location? Because often, you can meet you may be an American citizen or a green card holder, and you'll meet someone who's from France, but you want to marry, in Spain, in Italy, Greece. Greece is a very popular destination lately for weddings. And I'll explain everything to you. Or you want to obtain a fiancé visa for your fiancé to make sure that he or she can come over to the U.S., and then you can marry them in the United States. It's useful and extremely helpful to have legal advice. Because if you don't, you can make mistakes on forms, and those visas could be denied. And usually, when people are ready to get married and have been engaged, the longer the separation. Things get really complicated, extremely emotional. And the last thing you want is for your fiancé to get distraught over an unfair decision denying a visa by the State Department, right, your Citizens Immigration Services, because that can have devastating consequences. So my advice again, spend a little bit of money, come in at least for an initial consultation, pay for that, and then let's see whether you need, how many additional professional hours you need to get everything done. To check all the paperwork, to check all the documentation that you're supposed to present, and everything else. We'll explain to you all the requirements, help you prepare for the interview, help everyone prepare for the interview, right? Both the sponsoring U.S. citizen or green card holder, permanent resident, or the foreign relative, or future spouse or current spouse. That's about it. Regarding spouses, what would be the last issue? Adjustment of status. All right. You can either file a petition for an alien relative if they're abroad, but if they're in the U.S., you adjust status. And often I get situations where people want to adjust status after their spouses or their fiancés or boyfriends, girlfriends are already out of immigration status. In other words, they came to the U.S. on a tourist visa, visitor visa, and B1, B2, where they came to the U.S. as for instance, work travel program, or student visas, J visas, F visas. They met someone, they overstayed, and now they're going to submit paperwork after their foreign boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, or spouse is out of immigration status. What do you do, especially in today's climate where there is potential for someone to be detained by ICE, right? Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and potentially deported or put in one of those immigration detention facilities, pretty much like a prison, right? Or jail. So talk to a lawyer right away, and we'll show you how to submit everything properly and what to expect and how to minimize within available means getting detained, having the foreign spouse or the foreign relative be detained when they're adjusting status in the U.S. Things can also be complicated as far as relatives and even minor children. Imagine if you had minor children, they came to the U.S. as visitors. And especially if you're a green card holder, and for some reason they can't go back to their country. What are you going to do? They still have to go through consular processing abroad. They're not eligible or entitled to adjust, right? Or there are waiting periods, right? Because there are quotas on visas that are available for people who are being petitioned just by green card holders. Issues can get really complicated because what you don't want to do is you don't want to risk permanent ban or a 3 or a 10-year ban to the U.S. for overstaying a visa. You also don't want to risk being detained and deported by ICE. Right? So that's something to think about. That's about it. Basically, if you have questions, feel free to call me. And America is the land of immigrants. So let's try to make this, if you look at the 4th of July, what it stands for, what Independence Day stands for me as an immigrant to the U.S., myself, I came to the U.S. when I was 11 years old, and I became a U.S. citizen as a minor child. I acquired it through my mother when she received her U.S. citizenship. I think it's extremely important to make the process democratic, fair, and accessible to people. But when you're dealing with government agencies and people who work for these agencies, often they can act like bureaucrats, petty bureaucrats, and make things complicated. Or the regulations can be complicated, and you may not be able to understand and meet all the requirements if you do things on your own. So if you can't get stuff done on your own, or you don't want to take the chance, talk to me or another immigration lawyer will help you. Thank you. Happy holiday.